Good evening, viewers. Another episode of Guest with Nazir. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. As usual, in this show, we have a special guest, Jay Bhayani. She's specialist in employment law. Welcome, Jay, in my show.
Hello, Mohammed.
Thank you very much. We'll start with your early life. So, from where you started your educational career?
Well, I was actually born in Africa, in Uganda. Came over to England and did my schooling here. And then I went to university to do a law degree. And then the traditional path of doing, in those days, the solicitor's final examinations at Chester, and then got my training contract. So,
at that time, do you have any ideal at that stage in your mind that you were following any personality as a lawyer or any person?
No, to be honest, I used to come home and watch Crown Court. You know, in the early 80s, Crown Court was on at lunchtime, and so I used to come home from school and watch it, and it just really inspired me. And I thought, you know, that's what I want to do. So from quite a young age, I used to read a lot of books about legal issues, and you know, that was my ambition from quite a young age.
So what do you think about the profession over the years? Because you have seen the progression of the profession over the year. How you see in the decades how it has progressed?
Well, I think it's changed a lot in the 23 years that I've been practicing. It certainly had a lot more status, and the quality of legal services were, in my opinion, much better then. It's become much more commoditised in certain areas of work, which unfortunately has driven down the profession, so that you, unfortunately, as young people entering the profession, they just haven't got the jobs available that we had in our time, and the partnership prospects and career progression and salaries that were available before.
So which area of law you specialise?
So I specialise in HR and employment law, and have done for many years now.
So if we're talking about HR and employment law, so it means if somebody's starting up a job and they will sign a contract which is called employment contract. So what is the importance of employment contract?
Well, first of all, there's a legal requirement to give to all employees within 2 months of them starting employment a statement of main terms of employment. It's not technically an employment contract, but it's always advisable to give a contract because it sets out the relationship between the employer and the employee, so that everybody knows what they're working towards and knows what each other's expectations and obligations are.
So this contract, what do you think, that it is a detailed document, it's a short document? How big it will be?
Well, there's no specific length to it, but it has to contain certain specific things. So, for example, basic terms and conditions, such as what somebody will be paid, what hours they'll work, where they'll work from, the name of the employee, and who they're employed by, those kind of things. And then there are lots of other things that you might want to build into your contract that are more specific to a particular industry sector.
So it means if somebody is getting an employment contract from employer, so they should take independent advice on it?
Ideally, yes, particularly if it's a senior employee who might have, for example, restrictions on their post-termination, what they can do after they leave. And so I think that's really important to get that checked so that it doesn't trip you up further down the line in your career.
We have talked about the employment contract, but at the same time, if sometimes things are not, goes according to the plan, so there will be some, if an employee has some breach of contract, there will be some proceedings. How it works and what are the simple procedures, if we can explain for our viewers?
For breach of contract or for dismissal and general workplace
for any disciplinary
issues?
Proceedings against an employee?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, things don't always work out, and my advice to my business clients is always to deal with things rather than let things fester, because they usually get worse, not better. And I think the key thing, first of all, is to look at things like performance management, making sure systems are in place to make sure that the employee knows what's expected of them. And then if they're still falling short of what's required of them, then there are disciplinary proceedings or capability proceedings that can be brought. So that's a formal internal process. If the worst comes to the worst, then obviously an employer can look to dismiss an employee, and they have to demonstrate that the dismissal is for a fair reason, and there are a few potentially fair reasons for dismissal.
We have talked about the dismissal. So if somebody is going to be dismissed from the job, so he or she will be given some notices, or there will be some formal proceedings about it?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, obviously it's more complex than this, but in a nutshell, the procedure is that the employer must call the employee to a meeting by way of a written letter and explain in that letter what their concerns are, so that the employee has enough information to be able to put their counter argument. And then there's a face-to-face meeting, which is the second sort of step, where the company listens to the employee's version of things, puts any documents or evidence that they're relying upon, and then they communicate the outcome of the disciplinary hearing, which might be a dismissal or a warning. And then the final sort of step is that the employee always has a right of appeal, and the appeal should be dealt with by ideally somebody more senior than the person who made the disciplinary or the dismissal decision.
So in these proceedings, or in this all procedure, a lawyer is allowed to represent an employee or not?
No. What the law says is that the employee has the right to be accompanied, but that is by a trade union representative or a work colleague. In some circumstances, an employer might allow an employee to bring a family member or a friend or a lawyer, but it's unusual to allow that.
Thank you. Quite detailed answer. Sometimes some employees think that they have been dismissed on the basis of constructive dismissal. So for our audience, what is the constructive dismissal, and what are the grounds of that some employee, if they want to prove that this is constructive dismissal, so how we can define it?
Right. Constructive dismissal is unfair dismissal, but it's actually where the employee resigns and leaves a workplace because they feel that they can no longer continue to work there. And they have to show that the employer is in breach of some serious or fundamental employment terms. And because of that, the employee feels that they can no longer continue to work for the employer. And the sorts of breaches that we usually deal with are things like bullying and harassment, things like pay issues. So if an employee feels that they're being bullied and that the employer hasn't protected them, then they might say, well, although you haven't dismissed me, I'm leaving because I can no longer be expected to work here because you've been in breach of your obligations to me, and then make a claim for constructive unfair dismissal.
So it means there were some circumstances for the employee, so he or she has no option to leave the place.
Yes. Or they feel that there's no option for them. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Another terminology which has been used in the media and also in the newspaper, discrimination at workplace. Mm-hmm. So what are the main kinds of discrimination at workplace, and how it has been defined in employment law?
Well, discrimination laws are very comprehensive under the Equality Act now. There are certain what we call protected characteristics. So most people know that they can't be discriminated against on the grounds of their disability or their race or their sex or sexual orientation, and their I think their age. What some people currently are arguing is that things like caste discrimination, for example, is that a protected characteristic? What about obesity? There's been a lot in the press recently about that. They aren't protected characteristics under the legislation. And so it's a bit of a grey area as to whether somebody could make a claim for discrimination for those sorts of things.
Thank you. Viewers, we are discussing today employment law. If you have any questions, you can email me, and in my coming shows, I will try to answer your questions. Keep watching Sheffield Live TV. Jay, we have covered our first part of the questions. Now I proceed towards some more questions about employment law. If somebody has a claim that he or she has been discriminated at workplace, so what are the remedies available in the law?
Well, if they succeed in pursuing a claim in the employment tribunal, which is what they would need to do, if the tribunal finds that they were discriminated against, then the tribunal can award compensation. And that compensation is made up of a number of things. So loss of earnings is one aspect of it. Tribunal can also award future loss of earnings for a period of time that they think the employee won't be able to be employed back to the original position. And also the difference with discrimination claims is that the employee can be awarded something called injury to feelings. So that's compensation for the discrimination and the consequences of that discrimination for the employee.
Thank you very much. Recently, we have seen a lot of changes in the employment law. So how we summarize these for our viewers quickly?
Well, it's very difficult to do that because employment legislation changes a lot. In the years that I've been practicing employment law, I've seen enormous changes. I think currently the big change at the moment that people are talking about is shared parental leave. As an example, so that's the concept of sharing leave when a woman has a baby. Usually she's responsible she takes maternity leave, but I think we could see a complete culture change with a change in the legislation that allows the father of the child to have a period of time to share that maternity leave, but it's called parental leave. And it applies to same-sex couples and to adopters as well as birth parents.
Any changes, if let's say we will give you opportunity, we assume or presume today that you have been empowered to change the employment law, what one change you would like to bring into this legislation or in this law?
I think that one of the things that I'd like to see is a reversal, actually, of some of the changes that have come into play recently. So, for example, one of the most significant changes has been the introduction of tribunal fees. And what that's done, unfortunately, because the fees are so heavy, so high, it's meant that a lot of people with genuine claims aren't able to bring claims in the tribunal because they simply can't afford to pay the fee. I think it's right that tribunals make an employee pay some fee, but I think they've been set far too high, and I've seen firsthand legitimate claims from employees who can't pursue claims.
So we may say that there is a hurdle in kind of fee or in form of fee in the way of justice that people are now unable to access to justice?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think it was right that the government had to look at making things easier for employers because the pendulum has swung too far at times. And because I act for employees as well as businesses and charities, I see it from all angles. But I really do see some genuine cases of people who are very disadvantaged and aren't able to access justice anymore compared to when I started out in practice, certainly.
For our viewers, how we can define the steps of employment tribunal from beginning to end? Just quickly, if we want to explain some steps, how it works in employment tribunal. Okay,
so the first step is that the employee puts their claim form in, and the claim form is called an ET1 and an employment tribunal 1. The company, or the respondent as they're called, then has an opportunity to respond to that, and that's called an ET3. And then there are certain stages that you have to go through before you get to the point where a judge will listen to the case and make a decision. So that will be things like disclosure of documents. So each party exchanges documents that they want to rely upon to evidence their case. And then there's witness statements. So obtaining witness statements, each side will have an opportunity to do that. And those witnesses will then have to attend the tribunal to give evidence. And that's really, after the witness statement stage, you move on to a hearing when the tribunal will make a decision.
Do the tribunal follow the strict procedures like civil court or county court does, or it's a different?
Yes, it's become more and more formal. The tribunal system was designed to be much less formal initially, but it really does pretty much follow civil procedure rules, perhaps not quite as rigidly, so there is more leeway, I think, in practice for people to really have their cards on the table and explain the case to the tribunal. But, you know, it is a formal court process.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now we will proceed towards our lighter questions. Okay. We call them rapid fire questions. What is your favorite food?
Well, that has to be my mum's Gujarati food that I grew up eating. There's a real shortage of that in Sheffield, and I'm vegetarian, and I'd love there to be a Gujarati thali restaurant or something in Sheffield one day. Good.
And what is your favourite place? Which place you want to visit quite often in your life?
Well, I've been to Italy a number of times, different parts of Italy, and I just love it. I feel a real affinity to Italy. I like the climate, the views, the food, the people. So, yeah, I'd like to do a bit more of that when I have the time.
And your favourite sport?
Tennis, I think. I like watching tennis, and I've played a bit of tennis, but there isn't much time for sport. I wouldn't say I'm a particularly sporty person either.
And any incident you want to share with our viewers, because everybody has incident which you always remember in profession, so you want to share with our viewers?
In professional life?
Yes.
I think I had an unusual experience in that I came from a background where I wasn't connected to anyone. I didn't have a leg up, as it were, you know, into the profession. And so joining a firm when I qualified, a firm called Watson Eason many years ago, just the experience of really being able to shape that firm and becoming a partner at a time, you know, in the 90s when not very many women certainly from, you know, an Asian background, had the opportunity to get to the level that I did. And then becoming the senior partner, you know, I felt like a really good reward for all the hard work that I'd put in.
And the best moment of your life?
Well, I don't know. My kids would probably want me to say their birth.
Yeah, of course.
But to be honest, one of the things that I felt most proud of is passing my driving test at 17, because I had two older brothers who were 2 years and then another 2 years older than me. And so, you know, they would have given me hell if I hadn't passed first time, because they both did.
And how you see profession over the year and the importance of pro bono work?
Well, you know, in the days when I was a trainee solicitor and a junior solicitor, it was common practice for us to be expected to do pro bono work, and we used to go to citizens' advice bureaus and advice centres to provide free work, and legal aid was available for most areas of work. Unfortunately, that's changed an awful lot, and I could be wrong, but I don't see young solicitors doing the sort of pro bono work that we, you know, were expected to do, and that were the foundations for our building our careers and our connections.
What you will give a message to our viewer, and especially the young lawyers who are becoming and coming to this profession? So what are your thoughts about them, and how you think that they can improve their career and they can, you know, enhance their skills if they're becoming a solicitor?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of young people who come and ask for mentoring or for work experience, and I've always tried to help with that. I think what I find now is that it's very, very competitive for young people. There are a lot more law graduates and LPC, the legal practice course graduates, than there are jobs. And so you have to differentiate yourself. So making sure that they get good work experience, making sure that, you know, they have good communication and social skills, they understand business skills, I think, are vital now, because the job of a lawyer these days isn't a technical understanding the law sort of job anymore, is it? As you know, it's much more about managing clients' expectations, managing money, and running a law firm as a business.
Viewers, I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. This was Guest with Nazir. Che, thank you very much for joining me, and I hope in future and coming days we'll join another show, another talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me.